I'm not dying. I'm not dying to watch it.
You guys are so supportive of one another. You're like, give me the same vaxes. Vet my TV for me. It's very sweet to see.
Yeah.
I'm sorry you're feeling like poop though.
Oh,
only him. He's so weak.
That's a man cold.
I feel great. I didn't cancel any lessons.
Yeah.
I did my full work day.
Nice.
Even had breakthroughs. One of my little kids sang a high C today.
Aw.
Crazy.
Oh, you didn't tell me about that.
Yeah, I was pretty proud.
Oh.
Yeah.
Can you replicate that right now?
I don't have perfect pitch. I have a piano.
Oh god.
Let's see.
I thought she was just gonna go off the cuff, but she's prepared.
She's like, no.
Okay, I've got my pitch. Are we ready?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's 10 o'clock and we have neighbors.
In love with movies, in love, in love, in love,
Dani and Nic.
in love with movies. Da-da-da.
Welcome, movie lovers, to In Love with Movies.
I'm Dani.
And I'm Nick.
And this is In Love with Movies.
And I've already said that, but what do we do here, Dani?
We talk about movies and what else, Nick?
Love.
Yay.
Yes.
And we have some fun guests today, some returning guests. If you had to turn your sound down before the break, that's because we have some musical genius. And Brad.
And Brad. Yeah, no, my talents rely elsewhere.
So sorry, that's such a bad intro. Nick, do you want to introduce these two humans on the horn that I do hear? I said this last time, but I hear your voices ringing through my house all the time. I hear you.
Indeed. I'm caught up on almost their entire catalog at this point of their lovely podcast. All except for a couple of comics that I knew I still wanted to watch. I think I tweeted about it recently. I just started reading Saga, so now I'm going back and listening to their Saga episodes. But other than that, I have heard all of their show, Comic Book Couples Counseling. Welcome, Brad and Lisa Gullickson.
Thank you. I'm so glad that, like, Saga is one of the few comics where I feel like you can be spoiled. I'm generally a person who doesn't believe in spoilers. But Saga has some twists and turns where I would feel really guilty if we kind of pulled the rug out of some of those surprises.
Yeah, no, I think you maybe all said that on some other show or one of your other episodes that I was listening to that referred to it, and I was like, noted. I know I eventually want to read that comic, so I'm just going to put those episodes aside for now. And as I was saying the other day, now it's just a lovely treat because I get to listen to 2019 Brad and Lisa, and just very different, so sweet and innocent vibes. I think it was in your first year of the episode or the podcast, and now we're in, year 5 or 6. What is it now?
We're in year 6. We've done 5 years. I recently went back and I listened to, I think it was our April 2020 episode with Stephen Bissett, just as lockdown was really like in full effect. And that was a hell of a trip down memory lane. What a journal podcasting is. I don't know if I love it for myself.
You can do what I do and just not listen.
Yeah, that's a good strat.
I don't listen to our podcast.
I definitely would not go back to 2019, Brad.
Yeah. Well, Nick likes it.
I
Thank
do.
you, Nick.
I do.
Because we're missing out on 2 listens, 3 listens. We need those numbers.
Well, yeah, but that is the podcast we have you all on for. Broadly speaking, that's what you all do regularly together. We heard a little bit about that when you guys were on with us last time and shared your entire love story. But recently,
and they should go listen to it. It's what other movie we talk about? Spider-Man
3, and I will be leaving a link in the notes of this episode, so you all can go back to that and listen to it as well. Danielle and I's audio.
We were pro Spider-Man 3.
I definitely was.
Yes, yeah, I think it was an enjoyable movie.
We were all 4 pro Spider-Man 3. I don't think all 4 of us will be pro today's movie, and we might as well give a little preview for those who are skipping ahead to the second half. Brad and Lisa, what is the movie that we have selected? And just the movie.
And by we mean Brad.
Yes, that's correct.
Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Francis Ford Coppola's Bram. Yeah.
So, fun fact, and this is a perfect time to bring this one little bit up because of how you introduced that. when I first told Danielle, oh, they've selected Bram Stoker's Dracula, she went, oh, that should be fun, and got like really genuinely excited for it. And about 2 to 3 days ago, she realized that we were not referring to the black and white original Boris Karloff, and that instead it was the 1990s Francis Ford Coppola. I think we were talking about Francis Ford Coppola and Megalopolis.
No, you said Keanu Reeves, and I said he was not around in the black and white
That's
times.
what it was. So it dawned on her that she was on for a different ride than what she had originally anticipated. And we'll leave the rest of that for the second half of the conversation. What I was going to say is you all, in addition to your podcast, you've recently embarked on a completely new venture together. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, we've written our first comic. It will appear in the Pots and Panels, a comic cookbook anthology, which has recently just launched on Kickstarter. Hopefully you can just Google that. Maybe there's a link in the show notes. I don't want to presume. But
You'll
you
put
can
one.
go seek
We could
that
put one.
out.
We could do that.
We're extremely proud of it. It's a short story. You know, the anthology itself is over 400 pages of comics and recipes from the likes of Steve Niles and Hilary Barta. Um, who else is really rad in it? Phil Hester and Andy Parks,
Tim
Andy
Seeley.
Kuhn, Tim Seeley is in the book. Michael Avon Aming does the foreword for the book. Mark Resnicek of the Toadies does the afterword of the book. So it's this massive tome, but our story, which is called The Vegetable, and it is illustrated by Gerald von Stoddard, is just 7 pages.
Yeah, and it's about how when I discovered that I wasn't the only person in the relationship with weird phobias, we grew closer together. I've never summarized that worse. Don't cut that out. I want people to know that I'm a human being who does things differently.
Can I give it? Can I
Yeah,
give
you
it a
do
pitch?
it. I think you do it.
So the story is from Lisa's perspective. It is a memoir. It is about her discovering the phobia that I have after she has revealed her anxiety disorder to us early on in our relationship when we were still dating. And it's about how our two weird phobias, in being honest about them with each other, brought us closer together.
That was perfect. Good job.
But what's great about it is it's told, you know, through Gerald von Stoddard's art, and he has this very gnarly horror aesthetic that really captures the panic of an anxiety disorder and the terror of my particular phobia. So it feels like a horror comic at times, but then also Gerald is able to capture the sweet elements and the comedic elements of this story, which again is just 7 pages, but we drag you through some tones.
That's amazing. How long did it take you all to come up with this, execute it?
Oh, not like Lisa. So Pots and Panels came to us and they asked if we would want to contribute, and no one's ever asked us to contribute to an anthology. And then again, you look at that table of contents and you're like, is this legit? Are you asking us to be in the same table of contents with Tim Seeley and Steve Niles?
That's awesome.
They said yes. Our friend of the pod, Neil Clyde, has a story in it. So we reached out to Neil and I was like, can we trust all this? And he was like, yeah, you can trust it. And so I said, all right, Lisa, we have to do a comic. Someone's asking us to make our first comic. This is the medium that we love the most. What should we write about? And then Lisa said,
I have an idea. You're going to hate it. Because when I think about Brad and food related things, the first thing that pops in my head is that Brad has an irrational fear of one specific vegetable, to the point where when he sees it, he is so full of not just disgust, but like
fear.
Terror?
Like fear.
Terror. He's terrorized by this vegetable.
My whole body turns into goosebumps.
And to get to the bottom of it, he he's had this his entire life, and his parents think that it is rooted in one traumatic incident from when he was a child.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's necessarily true, but it's the best story that we've got.
So you haven't gone to a psychoanalyst to, put you into hypnosis and
I should definitely go to therapy. I believe in therapy, but I've never partaken in therapy because I'm scared. So the podcast has been my therapy. Writing this story has been my therapy.
It is not a substitute. I'm
But
gonna put that out there.
But it is my excuse.
Yeah,
Okay,
there you go.
Lisa.
Sure, I'm into it. It's a low stakes. It's a low stakes phobia.
Yeah, it's a low stakes phobia. What the hell was I gonna say?
Something about how
I feel so squidgy talking about it because it is so.
It does make him uncomfortable.
Because the phobia is so irrational, and when when people learned about it all through my life, they mocked me usually. And the only person who really never mocked me was Lisa, because Lisa also has an irrational phobia. And it's really weird to talk about it, and I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to do a story about it. But after Lisa suggested the story, I took like 48 hours to think of a better story, and I just couldn't. And I said, okay, well, let's go with your story.
And we've done so many podcasts with so many creators, and I don't know if we've learned anything about writing comics, but we've definitely learned a lot about what we like in a comic and the kinds of comic books, comic stories that we continue to talk about. And they are the ones with, at the heart of it, a message. And I think that, like, as a person with a lot of anxiety, and having that anxiety being alienating a lot of the time, just the idea of like, hey, everybody's weird, wear it on your sleeve, be weirdness forward, and then you'll find someone who will be weird with you.
Yeah, and part of like my relationship with my phobia evolving thanks to Lisa was when early on in our dating life, she discovered that my phobia has a specific name, which means that there are other people that feel this way. And that kind of gave me the comfort of a community around this phobia,
Sure.
which I have not actually entered into.
He just knows that it exists.
It exists. You're not alone.
Just knowing that I'm not alone brought me a lot of comfort. It hasn't cured me in any way, but I have, depending on my day and depending on my mood, I have been able to approach this vegetable in ways that I haven't been able to before. And one of those ways was writing a comic about it. In other ways is eating food that involves this vegetable. And mostly thanks to my love of Indian food, I've been able to encounter this and enjoy this vegetable. But I really have to talk to myself before I consume it. I gotta give myself a pep talk.
Disassociate a little bit.
Yeah.
So
the human brain, wild.
It is wild.
It really is. And it is not my branch of psychology to know and understand phobias, but just knowing a little bit about human behavior and some of the ways that we all process things. It's always fascinating to me to hear these stories. But I also wanted to share, and I don't want to disclose too much because I know we are trying to avoid certain topics. And for example, it has been referred to as the vegetable rather than anything else for good reason.
That's why I talked about it.
I have read, because I am a patron of Brad and Lisa's show.
Brad and Lisa.
Brad and Lisa's show. I'm a patron, and I have therefore had the privilege of a little bit of a preview, getting to read their script for it. So all I will say, as someone who is an independent observer, it is everything that these two are about in the best way. It beautifully, in my opinion, articulates what they try to put out there in terms of positivity in the world, what they communicate in terms of supporting each other as a couple, and how you find your person, and how it is that person understanding, seeing, and fully accepting all of you, including the worst parts or the parts you are most embarrassed by. And then it also includes a lot of vulnerability from each of them, because the book, without it, hopefully it's okay to me, says Lisa shares sort of a number of her maybe fears, anxieties, phobias, that some of which may seem a little bit more normal to some people, but there's a lot of them. And then Brad has this one, but it's this one that, boy, does it stand out, and it clearly is really, really informative for the two of them. So
it's cool to be on a podcast with someone who with a psychologist. So, like, just in your opinion, do you think that every phobia has to have some kind of traumatic root, or do some of us, like, because my phobia has a lot of branches, but I wouldn't say that I had like one definite like this is the thing where I was like, for the rest of my life, I'm going to avoid all of these things to avoid this one thing. Can you just one day just wake up and be weird?
I think that's called birth, right?
Yeah, so I will give a little bit of an answer, but with huge caveats and grains of salt. For one thing, yes, I do think you wake up one day and you're weird, and that's the day you're born. I think we are all born with a little bit of weirdness. I do think we are informed by our past experiences. Everything we are is a amalgam of genetics and past experiences, and our genetics interacting with those past experiences, and all of that informing things forward. I am not a clinical psychologist. I want to put that out there. Very big letters, not a clinical psychologist. So I am not a person who can speak with any real level of expertise. I have taught intro psychology courses that gives you a lot of sort of those basics. And so speaking from that place, I don't think that it is any longer believed that all phobias come from sort of any one traumatic experience. That is and I made the joke of psychoanalysis and hypnosis, that is very much a psychoanalytic perspective, that it's this sort of repressed thing, that there's something underneath the surface you may not even remember, et cetera, and so forth. Very Freudian. For many, many different reasons, Freud has largely fallen out of favor in his theories. A lot of it having to do with, Freud was very good at bringing together unified ideas and moved the science of psychology forward huge leaps and bounds. But he also made a lot of claims that were sort of presented in a way that one might argue could not be scrutinized through scientific process.
Like girls want to do
all
their
women
dads
want to do their dads and all dudes want to do their moms, and and if you smoke cigarettes, it's because you never made it out of, and I think this is not technically Freud, it may have been one of his followers, Erickson, but you have an oral fixation because you never quite moved on, and that's also why you might be gay, because you want to have peni in your mouth and things of that nature. So
Freud would really like the movie that we're going to talk about, but
That's what I was just going to say.
Yeah.
no spoilers.
Not wrong. You are not wrong.
Coppola's read some Freud.
And I think the original author, Bram Stoker, probably, I can't remember when that book came out, but it would have, I think, come from some of the same philosophies or views on sex and repression and Christian societies and things of that nature. So yeah, it's interesting stuff, but hopefully that answered your question, Lisa, to the extent that I can do so with the level of expertise that I have.
Yeah, thank you. I do think that Brad's parents' origin story for his phobia, which is pictured in this book, it's my favorite page in the entire comic. I think it is so effective. Like, I do think that that's compelling. Like, okay, this is a traumatic incident where like my phobia, the origins of it are just more nebulous.
I think it's a compelling idea, and I think it's a compelling page in the comic. And I love, again, the way that Gerald executes that page, also paying homage to the cartoonist Darwin Cook, which was the original intent of that page. Um, I think it's a great story, and I think that story is there more to rationalize my phobia for my parents than it is for me.
Because Brad also, as a toddler, ran through a glass door and got a million cuts all over him, but he's not afraid of glass doors.
And also, when I was a toddler, I had a brick thrown in my head and had my skull cracked open. I've had many childhood injuries. And only this one maybe started a phobia.
And none of them are his parents' fault, by the way. We should put that out there.
Yes, that's true. That's true. I mean, they didn't strap me in, right? So like, there's a reason I cracked my head on that counter. That is the origin of my phobia, maybe. But I think really what that story is about my parents trying to get to the bottom of this weird thing that their child suffered from, which they always treated with great love and if not understanding, empathy towards. They never mocked me.
That's good.
And to this day, my parents will still go the vegetable. And in fact, when we went to that pub to oh man, why am I doing this? When we went to that pub to celebrate my mom's citizenship anniversary, we ordered fish and chips, and one of like my mom's favorite English delicacies is a mushy version. This is a clue, a mushy version of this vegetable. And before she ordered this mushy version of this
Right.
vegetable,
I was just about to say Freud is loving this.
yeah. Before she ordered, I'm doing it again. This mushy.
It's the flu shot plus the COVID shot.
Of this vegetable, she asked me, "Is it okay that I order the vegetable?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm an adult." And then, as my mom ate it, I just looked to the corner of the.
I like that your response was, "I'm an adult. I can handle this." That's funny.
We've never handled anything in our lives. That is something that we have in common.
Hey, but you know what? That is a coping. That is handling it. You have, as an adult, found, yes, I am comfortable with someone around me doing this thing. I'm just gonna choose not to look at it because that allows me to get through it.
You know, that's what I do. Right?
Coping is totally valid.
You see the vegetable in movies, you see it in daily life. You're at a restaurant, the vegetable's on the table next to you. You just look over it.
Yeah.
You just look over it. It's below your eye line. You don't see it. You don't think about it. Don't worry about those goosebumps.
I think that's funny, but like in a sweet way. And the sweet part of your story is very much like the reason that you all found love is because you were able to accept the quirks of one another. Oh, thank you, Nick. And I know that Nick has said to me many times that he feels like he can truly be his true self around me and doesn't feel like he can do that around anyone else. And I feel the same way about Nick. And I think that is what makes a good relationship. And for us, true love is like truly being able to like know that you are a big weirdo, but someone else accepts you for all of the weird parts of you, no matter what.
Yeah, we definitely agree.
Yeah, I mean, we're not relationship experts by any means. I always try to give
Neither
that
are we.
disclaimer somewhere in our shows. I love how you all have put it. I am an expert at my relationship. Like,
Yeah. We're
and even
experts
then,
at
not
loving
always.
each other only.
Yeah, and I don't know,
And we still mess it up all the time. We're
Exactly.
constantly hurting each other's feelings. And,
Yep,
but
us
we're
too.
doing the best that we can.
But yeah, no, I think if I were to give any one piece of advice to people, it is figure out how to be vulnerable with the people you are attracted to and want to be in a relationship with, because that to me, that is the foundation, in my humble opinion, of any long-lasting healthy relationship, because you can weather all of those ups and downs. You can accidentally hurt each other, but if you feel seen, you feel understood, or you feel like someone at least is trying to be there for you and you don't have to hide any part of you, that's makes everything else work out in the long run.
Yeah. We definitely feel very safe with each other.
Yeah.
Like we've never had something where it's just like, and now our relationship is on the rocks and we don't know what's gonna happen. Like every time we've had, an argument or a little bit of a rough go, it was never our relationship that was at stake. It was only our feelings that were at stake, and maybe some wasted time.
And winning.
And
right?
And we do generally declare winners.
Oh.
I was the bad one. It was me. And then the other person is like, you are correct. There you go. It was good.
I was about to say that that's not how we handle it, but then again, I feel like literally earlier today, where there's been multiple instances where it was like, no, I'm the one who instigated that. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Yeah.
Here's the thing I think might have caused it, but I definitely am the one who started it. I'm sorry.
Yeah. But earlier I did say, are you open to feedback?
And I said no.
You did say that.
I said not at this moment. And then
We circle back.
I took a moment. I breathed, sat down, calmed my heart rate, and then said, in this moment, I am now open to feedback.
I learned that from yoga teacher training, actually. Like, we were supposed to give feedback to everyone, but you had to ask them if they were open first.
Yeah, and I love the idea that you don't, if they say they're not open, you're not allowed to be like, see, I told you were an asshole. Only a true monster would not be open to feedback in this moment. I win.
And I take that philosophy of asking for consent regarding feedback. I take that into my creative life as well, where you write something and you go like, oh yeah, this is so good, and then you'll hand it to somebody this
Me.
person. And then, Lisa will have immediate notes, and she's like, "Oh, I think this is really good. I have some notes." I was like, "I don't want to hear them right now,"
Mhm.
And then maybe a day later, after I've thought about it, I'll be like, "Okay, I'll take notes now."
Yeah.
It's so funny you mentioned that. I feel like I have finally learned that about myself. Having written papers, having gotten feedback from work, especially I think of like writing drafts of like a thesis or a dissertation. And I've made the mistake of being like, this is the time in my schedule that it is convenient for me to attempt to work on this thing or read this feedback from this person who gave it to me. And I have now learned that it shouldn't just be about the time. You should figure out like, and in this time, just because I have the time, am I ready for that? Am I mentally, emotionally prepared for someone to potentially, make my paper bleed, as I would used to say?
My neutral position is not ready for feedback,
Yeah.
and that's made it really hard in writing and having editors. It's something that to this day, when I get those initial notes back from an editor, I want to fight. I want to go like, no, I'm right. But then, I give it some time, and then I look at it again and I go, okay, well, they haven't killed it.
Yeah. We're both little sensitive little sweeties. Like sometimes you send something and you want feedback,
Mhm.
and then they're like, "This is great," and then you go like, "Well, then clearly you didn't read it."
That was the case with the script for The Vegetable.
Yeah.
We finally submitted the script, and we were waiting to hear back from the editors and also from our artists. And all they said back was, "Wow, this is great. Thanks, guys." You're like, "Oh,
Oh no.
was it great?
Then
Can
you
I
start,
trust these people?"
all the self-doubt and all the things. I
Yeah.
think also it depends on who the feedback is coming from.
Sure.
Like sometimes if Nick were to give me feedback, it hurts the most because he's the closest to me, but also it means the most because that means that he's doing it out of love and out of kindness.
Yeah.
And I don't think it hurts. It's just like, that's the one like you were saying, Brad, where it's like, man, this stinks. Getting feedback.
This hurts. Yeah, it's
Well,
it
you
stings.
guys have both been teachers. So have you actually started teaching yoga?
Oh yeah, for years.
Okay. So like I teach music lessons, and sometimes like you have to gauge like, is this a time where you give your students notes, or
Mhm.
is this the time where you praise them for the growth that they've had
Mm-hmm.
and their attempt? And that's always, like especially like teaching singers, it's like really hard
I bet.
because they are their instrument. And
Mhm.
so when you come in hot and like I'm an intense person, and I'm a big time nerd about vocal pedagogy, so I love to get in there and go like, like, let's talk resonance, where's your tongue at? And and then you just see the eyes just fill with tears.
Aw.
So like I think it's like when you're in any kind of relationship, there is this like, okay, I'm taking the temperature of the situation, and you're not going to like, you're not going to nail it every single time. You're not going to give the person exactly what they need every single time. All you have to do is show that you care,
Right.
and that ultimately what you want, like if you're a teacher, ultimately what you want is to create somebody who's going to make music forever, or practice yoga
Mhm.
forever, or be curious about psychology forever.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're with a lover, right? When you're with your partner, you want to be like, oh, we just want to be better people all of the time, and we also want to be closer and more curious about each other all of
Yes.
the time.
Mhm. And when that stops, maybe that's a sign. Like you don't want
You're
that
on
to
the
stop.
White Lotus.
Yeah.
Good for you.
That show is not an example of
Good
glowing
relationships.
relationships.
But that does contain my phobia. So there you go.
The White
Hate that
Lotus
show.
does.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does.
Not mine though.
Not Brad's. Totally
Not
vegetable
yet.
free.
Yeah.
Not yet.
Wait till
Season 3's coming.
No, I think that's a beautiful thing, and I actually think that it does ring true about relationships too. It's one thing you were talking about, like teaching, and how do you sort of encourage that curiosity, and how it then spans to a lover. I was thinking about how the other thing I've learned when I was teaching, because it's been over a year now since I was regularly teaching. Anyway, you also learn where your own shortcomings are, and I have learned to then like blatantly and openly say that. So I sort of had, especially in a class where I knew I was going to be giving lots of feedback, I can remember I would explicitly sometimes say, like, hey everyone, I have this tendency to come across as condescending and sounding judgmental, and, you know, if I ever make you feel from my tone of voice like I think you are stupid, I promise you I don't think that. I know that that's a flaw of mine, not yours. I do not think any one of you is stupid. And in fact, then that's where I usually introduce things like no stupid questions for a class, and I kind of encourage that way of thinking. But that also makes me think of literally earlier tonight, I was kind of in our relationship admitting maybe that there was a flaw of mine that was causing some tension.
I was thinking about, I probably shared this story on the podcast, or you have. Nick did get one piece of feedback that really hurt him to his core. Do you know what I'm going to talk about?
I'm not sure I'm ready for that.
Not from me.
Oh, is it the sweating thing?
A student said he sweats too much.
Oh no!
That was their
Talk about
feedback.
things that are, who you are as a person and really not a place for growth that I can affect at all.
Professor Baldwin's too sweaty, man. Change it.
But yeah, no, we can go ahead and go to break, and then
Because I have so many things to say. Have I said that already? I took a lot of notes.
Danielle stopped taking notes after 4 pages and has some thoughts and some feelings.
I'm excited.
Wonderful.
All right. Well, then on the other end of this break, we will be revisiting Bram Stoker's Dracula. So we will see you shortly.
Is that Dracula? Love with movies.
Happy Halloween, movie lovers. I'm coming in here between the two segments because I wanted to let you know that if you've enjoyed what Brad and Lisa have been describing with their comic book available on Kickstarter, it only has 1 week left. That's right, just 1 week left for you to be able to support that Kickstarter and to get your copy. So if you like cooking, if you like comic books, or if you're just curious and interested by what they've described, make sure you go to check out the Kickstarter. It's a link in the show notes, but it is also Pots and Panels, a comic book cookbook anthology. Again, that's Pots and Panels on Kickstarter.com. Link in the show notes. Only 7 days left as of the release of this episode. So if you're listening to it now, you've got 7 days or less. So do not wait. Do not snooze. The scariest thing would be you not being able to support this podcast or support this, the friends of this podcast and their amazing Kickstarter. So go now. Go now. Run. Stop. Hit pause. Go find the link. All right. And now back to Comic Book Couples Counseling talking about Dracula.
In love with movies. Da-da-da.
And we're back. Welcome back, movie lovers in love with movies. Now we are getting ready for the second half of the podcast where we get to talk about our lovely movie. So today,
Lovely.
in honor of the spooky season and going along with the horror-esque comic that our guests are creating, we have watched Bram Stoker's Dracula from 1992. Now, as Brad introduced it earlier, this movie is directed by the famous Francis Ford Coppola, of Godfather fame as well as Apocalypse Now, but we've covered Godfather on this podcast. One thing I always forget that I did look up as I was looking through his IMDb, he also directed the movie Jack with Robin Williams, which is, I think, underestimated, very outside of the norm for the rest of his choices, but good flick.
And he's tearing up the box office right now with Megalopolis, a fable.
Tearing up the box office is an interesting choice of words for that. It's my understanding it's not doing as well and maybe not making him his money back. But
sad.
You know what? He had an opinion and he made a choice, and that is what he stuck to. And you got to give the man props for that.
So brave.
As all straight white men are, right, Lisa?
So brave.
The screenplay written by James V. Hart. I noticed that it was he'd also written Muppet Treasure Island and the movie Hook, which
Love those. Love them both.
Those are great.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. I'm like, I don't know what happened with this movie, but I love those other ones. Maybe it was because he was trying to venture into the adult fare, as where's Hook and...
Stick with Muppets.
All right, lots
hard.
Sorry, Brad.
Record.
I'm so sorry.
Lots of people starring in this movie. We've got Gary Oldman, which we've covered Fifth Element on this podcast before, so that's one performance that he is very famous for. Danielle did not recognize or did not understand who Gary Oldman was. That's who plays Dracula, for anyone who's wondering. Then we've got Winona Ryder. Winona obviously being famous for Beetlejuice, Edward Scissorhands, Stranger Things.
Literally everything.
Lots of the things. Anthony Hopkins, which I had to remind Danielle is Thor's dad. So, Thor's dad is in this movie. Keanu Reeves.
And Loki. Loki is also in it. Richard Grant from the TV show.
He's
Loki.
a Loki. He's not the Loki.
He's my favorite Loki.
He is a great Loki.
He was a great Loki. And you know what's funny? I have Richard E. Grant written down. That was the guy who played the psychiatrist in this movie, by the way.
Okay.
I did not even write down that he was Loki. I totally forgot about that. I always think of the movie Hudson Hawk when I think of Richard E. Grant, which is another underrated, I'll say.
Was he also with Nail and I?
He was.
Look at me go.
There
That's
you
in the
go.
Criterion Collection.
And then
I'm sophisticated.
we also have Keanu Reeves, as Danielle noted before, famous from The Matrix for viewers of this podcast.
Keanu Reeves was in this film?
Famous
Not
for
really.
To Do About Nothing.
Whoa. I mean, he really just sort of vanished into his character. Oof, surprising.
As did
What
all
I
of the
think
actors.
Really worked in his performance was his period hairstyle.
I have a note later on, not to spoil about his wigs and the unexplained choice of his hair discoloration. That I can make assumptions about why it was happening, but was never, as I caught it, addressed.
Agreed.
He was being drained.
He was traumatized.
And then we have Carrie Elwes from Princess Bride, and then he was less known to me, but Tom Waits is playing Renfield, and I know him from Seven
my
Psychopaths.
God. Whoa.
This is signs of how young you are. I
Oh,
forget how
love this.
young you two are. What are your ages again?
I was born the year this movie came out.
Tom Waits is a god.
Yeah.
But
Give me something else that I might have known him from, or other films that
I mean, he's a musician.
He's a musician, and he was like, if you were into if you're like I don't know, if you were like a goth girl,
Okay.
you wanted to marry him. His singing voice is if someone gargled.
No, you've heard it.
salt.
So you've seen Renfield. Now imagine Renfield singing.
That's how Waits is magical.
I would not say that he is a goth singer. Although I understand why goth girls might be attracted to
I'm saying,
Tom Waits.
if you listen to Tom Waits and you're a chick, you're parting your hair down the middle and you're wearing a lot of black lace.
To me, Tom Waits is Billy Joel, who's been dropped into a garbage disposal at the filthiest bar, and then run around and shredded a few times, and then popped out and just started singing. That's Tom
And
Waits.
sometimes they put him in movies in the 90s. And it was great.
He's All the World is Green. Hold on. I hope that I don't fall in love. Jersey
You
Girl.
can't tell from the titles. The titles will tell you nothing. You have to you have to submerge.
Okay.
I feel like
you should
Chocolate
listen-
Jesus.
Yeah,
that's the
Chocolate
one.
Jesus. That's
Chocolate
the
Jesus
one.
Is a great song.
All right.
Danielle's
Well,
adding this to the list.
Honestly, I love
I
music.
mean, yeah, but it does make me feel better when you all's reaction. I was like, is he a huge actor that I'm somehow missing? No, he's known for music
Oh, he's
more
a
than.
huge actor. He's huge.
Oh man, well everyone's acting in this
Nick,
was fantastic.
I
Sorry
have to call you out because you keep doing this to all.
to not naming the women. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Well, it's,
Who's
that's fair.
Lucy?
Okay.
Sadie Frost.
And what's she do?
I mean, she's an actress. She's been in a bunch of things. She's also a producer. She's produced a lot of things. She produced another excellent film that I'm sure you enjoyed called Sky Captain in the World of Tomorrow.
I've definitely seen it.
I actually did enjoy that movie. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but I did enjoy it. You're absolutely right, and I appreciate you calling me out.
Good. You white men over here.
Monica Bellucci is one of Dracula's brides.
I
One of the hottest women to ever live.
almost made that note as well, but I figured that I thought I might be judged for literally only bringing up like, oh, the hot woman who bared her chest, so therefore.
There was 3 of them.
There were.
I mean, there were 6 of them.
Well, 6. Yeah.
6 boobs.
They were all nice.
They were all nice.
They were. I'm not denying any of that.
It plays no factor in my love of this.
The boobs have nothing to do with it. Okay.
Coppola likes to make a very horny movie, and in the 90s, well, I was 1992, so I was born in 1983, so it's not
You
like I was.
can't do Dracula not horny.
Yeah,
I do agree with that.
Dracula is horny.
Yeah.
It
Look
has
at
to,
this-
it has to find some horny.
This note. This movie is so horny.
She's literally got like 6 lines underneath it.
My little Catholic eyes.
Yeah, no. I understand where you're coming from completely.
Well, speaking of the horniness, Danielle's going to summarize all of it for us.
I'm so excited.
Great.
In a quick little segment that we like to call Danny's Dingle.
Time for Danny's Dingle.
1462. Transylvania. A knight, dragon, or Dracula must stab everyone. Also in love, Elisabetta. But she thinks he's dead. He's not dead. He was just late. But she kills herself. Into the river. No. Then he denounces God and drinks cross blood. And that's how he becomes Dracula. So now we're in London. We have baby Keanu, baby Winona. They love each other. They kiss, but they haven't done it yet. But Keanu is a lawyer? Assistant?
Solicitor.
Yeah.
He's a solicitor.
Yeah, lawyer.
He's got a job to do. To stay at the castle. To buy 10 houses?
Yeah, a plot of land, Carfax Abbey, that whole little area.
Then let her do her thing.
Sorry.
This is her dingle.
I had a lot of questions about this movie. While he's away, Arabian Nights, the book.
I forgot about that.
Renfield eats bugs. I also had a dream last night that I was covered in maggots, and we watched this last night. Christ compels you, but not really. And then there's the wives and the boobs. Lucy is a floosy. Hold on. There's a lot of other things that happen in the movie that I don't think were pertinent to the plot. There's a monkey, and then a wolf, and then a bat, and then a very bad wig. Multiple very bad wigs. Lucy is dying. A head. A stab. Eating babies. Not good. A professor is also a vampire. Van Helsing. She kill him. What does that note mean? Lots of more boobs. And then I stopped taking notes because things got too dark. The end.
Yay! I really admire your ability to summarize things. I'm awful at summarizing things.
I'm sweating on that one because you had high expectations, and I think I missed a lot of things. But
Expectations exceeded. It was poetic. It covered all of the important stuff, which of course doesn't include the ending of the movie at all.
So before we get into the movie, should we talk about our love stories, Nick?
We should. So a little bit of a spoiler on love stories for this. I do know that I watched this movie at some point. I did not remember most of it. I caught most of it probably in glimpses and then just like made myself watch it sometime when I saw it on TV or rented a DVD. Because that would have been part of my history. At some point I would be like, this is an important movie. It's Francis Ford Coppola. It's Godfather, etc., etc. Danielle, her love story with this movie is having watched it just last night. And a little bit of a preliminary understanding of where Danielle was while we were watching this movie. 35 minutes in, she says, "How long is this movie?"
Oh no, you took notes on my experience.
And exactly halfway through, Danielle turns to me and goes, "Oh my God," after checking the timestamp. So that's Danielle's love story with this movie.
I'm sorry, Brad. I'm really sorry.
So that I will say, it's a little bit of a preview. Brad, in our last episode with him, said he is finding the joy in movies as he was as a child. And Brad will help us to find more of the joy in this movie.
I don't help others.
Because I do
He's
have...
an only child, have you not heard?
Yeah.
All of his endeavors are purely selfish.
Everybody's on their own journey. They come to Dracula when they come to Dracula.
I do have notes about some things that I appreciated about this movie, but I will not say I loved it on the whole. But that's getting ahead of
I also
ourselves.
about the turn of phrase "come to Dracula."
It was on purpose, Lisa.
So what is you all's love story?
Thank you.
So this was a pandemic watch for me. So like Brad watches movies all of the time. Brad is a prolific movie watcher. I am a codependent individual, so I cannot watch movies by myself.
I understand that.
So, like, it just feels like really weird to have a cinematic experience alone. But Brad
Feels
doesn't
normal to
find it
me.
weird at all. So he's watched a ton of movies that I have never watched. And so during the pandemic, we started. I think it's because I had never seen Godfather, and so we watched Godfather 1. I was like, I can see where people are coming from.
Agreed.
And then I watched Godfather 2 and 3, and I'm like, I don't think I like Godfather. And then he's like, well, what about, he's like, you like Twilight inexplicably, and I won't defend it. Maybe you'll like Bram Stoker's Dracula. And I said, sure, sweetheart. And then we watched it, and then I forgot that we watched it. And I was watching it again yesterday, and I was like, oh, we did watch this. and I, like, as a person with a lot of 90s crushes, there's a lot of delights in this movie. There's
Keanu's a babe.
Swoony boys with swoopy hair.
Yep.
So.
And then Brad.
Why'd you pick this guy?
One, it's a masterpiece. So, it came out in 1992. I didn't see it in the theater, but I definitely saw it when it came either onto HBO or home video. I was either 13 or 14 when I saw this movie.
I think that's important.
And I think that is important. And I was always a horror kid. I always loved Dracula, and this is like the most over-the-top version of this story. It is filled with all manner of cinematic techniques that I find fascinating. It's the practical effects are outrageous,
Yes.
and the only thing more outrageous than the practical effects are the performances. Everything is dialed to 11. I find the film to be very theatrical. I find the film to be very operatic,
Yes.
very melodramatic, and I dig all that stuff.
Yeah, I think when I was first watching it, at the beginning, I didn't know if it was, I was like, oh, this is camp. In my head, I had that it was camp. And then it got really dark, and so I stopped being like, this is camp, because to me, camp is
Not
joy.
Yeah, not
It got really dark. But I agree with everything that you've said, and the reason that we have this podcast and we talk about these movies is because I have my own personal experience. But when I get to hear it from the experiences of others, I genuinely do usually open my mind a little bit more. So I'm going to start hating on this movie, but I might not end that way.
Well,
and I
do you. Like, honestly, if you both come away with this going like this was a trash film, I'll go like, okay, valid.
I'm glad that it won't affect you. I will say, it's not trash.
No, it's not
One
a trash
of the other
film.
things that we talked about last time we had you on was how there's always something good to be found in a movie. And you actually just cited a lot of it's all of the practical effects, all of the cinematography. I have all these notes in my notes about the beauty of the cinematography. That one shot where he's like in the train, or it's like a painting, and all these things that are sort of one scene blending into the next, and the imagery that happens there, and the colors and the lighting. And then I just literally have I think 12 different moments where I was like, the special effects, the practical effects in this are so cool. And then I have specific examples that I wrote down, about 12 of them. All great. I don't agree with the operatic decisions. I agree that this is what's happening. I did not speak well for me. But there's so much to love in this movie and to appreciate about this movie that it helps you to understand why Francis Ford Coppola, regardless of whether you like all of his movies and like every choice he makes, there's a reason he is a name, and he is known for being a fantastic film director. So,
and I feel like this is his last great movie, in my opinion.
Whoa!
After this, you get things like Jack, you get things like The Rainmaker, you get things like Twixt and Megalopolis. And
I thought you said it was a brilliant movie. I thought the Megalopolis was a.
It's a fable. It's a fable. It shares a lot actually with his Dracula. I think if you watch Dracula and Megalopolis back to back, you'd be like, yeah, this is the spiritual sequel to his Dracula. And it embraces many of the storytelling, thematic, and artistic choices that are made in Dracula. I think it's less effective.
I think that there is something to wanting to do Dracula in 1992. Like, you think about culturally, we were having this kind of like anti-sexual revolution
And
where
we-
we were having a lot more sex in films,
But
but in a way that was extraordinarily prudish and always punishing.
what was written about a lot when this movie came out is we were coming out of we weren't coming out of it, but the AIDS crisis
That's right.
was at the forefront of the cultural imagination. And I think that does factor into the thematics of this movie.
100%, especially when you consider the Van Helsing,
Mm-hmm.
the
exactly what I was gonna say.
interpretation of Van Helsing, and talking about like diseases of the blood and like I love the 90s-ness of this movie. And I like, to me, that is all part of like the context of the entire film. Like, why are the peak images of purity in 1992 Keanu Reeves and Winona Ryder? Like that's just like such a like a weird, interesting choice.
Mm-hmm.
And like I can't take it out of the context of the period.
And at the time, I think I would have said, I wish Coppola had recast or cast differently when it came to Jonathan and Mina. But now, with my nostalgia beer goggles on, I love Keanu Reeves and Winona Ryder in these roles.
Because it had nothing to do with who they were as actors. It had to do with who we were as a culture and who we saw as clean and pure and the kind of people who can keep their horniness underneath their enormous skirt.
That's really interesting. I guess me personally, I don't really know I don't like spooky things. I didn't know like the story of Dracula. So
Well,
this was
really isn't it.
no.
Yeah.
That's like the other thing.
Okay.
Like if you compare the novel to what Francis Ford Coppola is doing, the Elizabetha Dracula Mina thing is not a thing.
Right.
And that's all this movie is.
I wondered about that because I had a note in here that I had frankly completely forgotten that it leaned so heavily on the whole reincarnated lost love angle of things, because that is very much a choice that's made, and it is very much a linchpin to the point where at the very end, when he dies, when Dracula is killed, you're sort of presented at least to see him in some regard as a sympathetic character, because you see, he had this really like Shakespearean, the way it's described, it's a sort of thought he was dead, so I killed myself, then I wanted to kill myself, or I, spurned God. Like it
was
is
Romeo and Juliet.
very Romeo and Juliet, such that it was an interesting choice, and it was such a critical piece to it that I was like, I don't remember that being a part of this movie. And then I thought to myself soon after, I do remember that being a trope that I feel like was in a lot of movies into the 90s and early 2000s, a lot of fantasy types of things. And I thought to myself, was this the one that maybe launched it? You know what I mean? Or brought it to the zeitgeist? Or was it already in the zeitgeist, perhaps?
I feel like to me, what this kind of resonates with is the order of deaths in slasher films. Like if you watch a lot of slasher films of the late 80s, early 90s, it is always the horny friend who goes first. And like, to me, starting with, this renouncing of God, this guy had been fighting in a holy war, and he was looking forward to coming home and consummating his relationship with his beloved that he was passionate about, and that joy is taken away from him, and he goes like, I have made all of this tremendous sacrifice for God. Am I not entitled to some kind of pleasure on
earth? And the priest says that his beloved is damned to hell because she has killed
committed
herself.
suicide.
Mm-hmm.
And so he feels betrayed by God, so he damns God. And I think you also need to think about Coppola's relationship with Catholicism and religion when you're talking about this movie as well. And I think he has a lot of sympathy for somebody who would feel this way towards their creator.
A lot of sympathy, but I would still say that the 90s glorified the virgin or the idea of a virgin. And like
totally.
so like it's like
Yeah, as does Coppola.
and as does the church to this day. So like I like the fact that this kind of like the idea of an entitlement to joy on earth, and what is the point of living? Why would I even want a piece of heaven if God is the type to let someone kill my wife with a lie, you know?
And when Dracula dies at the end of the film, his last words are Christ's last words on the cross.
Yep.
Yeah, why have you forsaken me? You know, it is finished. Like, and then we go to the actual story. We have Mina, who is clearly, if shown, like, as shown in them necking underneath the little in the garden as the peacock, not being symbolic at all, unfurls its feathers. Like, they're clearly very horny for each other.
And we travel into the eye of the peacock, which then becomes the tunnel with the train.
That was yep.
But like they decide they are going to save themselves for marriage, right? And he's going to go do the solicitor thing, sell some tracts of land, and then he'll return and he will get what he is entitled to, a virginal woman. And I lost my train of thought, but like, and then the person who ends up getting bit and getting killed first is Lucy, her friend, who is very sexually joyful and experimental and has multiple suitors and who absolutely are enamored with her. And she's the one who ends up being defiled and then killed. So like, to me, it's just like this Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula. That's a lot of names.
It is.
Is a slasher film.
Huh.
I did have a note that I wondered if the original story presents the characters that way as well. And since you all seem to have maybe been familiar with it.
I read Bram Stoker's Dracula. So Bram Stoker's Dracula was told entirely in correspondence, which I think is like very interesting and fun.
And we get a lot of that correspondence in this film. There is a lot of narration, a lot of reading of letters.
But like I don't remember the ins and outs of it. It's been like so many years.
Yeah, same.
But I do know the ins and outs of Twilight. So if you guys have any follow-up questions.
Well, no, I think that's a brilliant insight too about the friend, and it's unfortunate that I did not think to warrant the actress's name in our opening credits. Danielle's good at calling me out, but I do think it also goes to show that how the movie treats her. You know what I mean? Is like when she is sort of lured into the garden. There's so much time in this movie given to long shots and just sort of beautiful cinematography, but then there was no time given to any sort of explanation as to why she's wandering into the garden. You know, I mean, like there really could have been even just a moment where you had a little bit more exposition or explicit showing of Dracula
women
kind
like
of
gardens.
enchanting her.
She was a woman in the 1800s. What else? What was she going to do? Have a career?
No, she's food. She's food for Dracula.
Yeah.
I mean, she's lured out. She's under his mesmer, which is why she comes out into that garden eventually to then be ravished by a wolf that is under the control of Dracula.
You mean a monkey? I get so confused.
But that guy, I see that. I don't think that guy was a monkey. I thought that was a wolf man.
Are they all this?
I wondered if it was a Batman.
Are they all Dracula?
A wolf Batman.
No, they did mention that he does have the power of transformation.
Yeah.
So like that was, and also the power of mesmer was also like in the context of the film, but like a lot is going on. Like so much is happening in that movie. And like it was confusing because they were like, there was, report of a wolf has escaped from the zoo, but then also Dracula is a wolf.
Yeah.
So like I also found that a little bit confusing. I guess maybe as I don't know. I don't know why it was that way, but that I don't know.
Yeah, I think I appreciate what you all are saying about the themes and the culture. It makes a lot more sense now with the context and stuff. But the execution for me was just really hard to follow because there were a lot of like disjointed scenes that I was like, wait a second, how did we get here? What's going on here? We're digging boxes. Then we have the man in the cell. What's his name? Renfield, who never really gets a full satisfying payoff. He's kind of
Well-
in his box the whole time.
I mean, Renfield was the person who went to Transylvania originally
Right.
to make the deal with Dracula, then went crazy,
Mm-hmm.
and wants and became lured by Dracula to join his immortal life. But Dracula just found him so pathetic that he was not going to grant him that, so he was forced to just eat bugs and kitty cats or whatever he could find.
I think that, like, in the story, he, acts as kind of the canary in the coal mine, because he is what what's the character's name?
Jonathan Harker.
He is what Jonathan Harker would be if he
Right.
did not have the anchor that is a virginal woman
Yeah,
to
well,
look forward to.
and he as he reaches his end, when he has that encounter with Mina in the asylum, and he's like, girl, you gotta run. All right. I love that sequence because it's so clear that he hates himself so much, and he's still mad at Dracula for denying him the promise that he thought he had been given.
Right.
And then Dracula's like, dude, I've moved on, I'm just gonna kill you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I guess a lot of what was confusing to me were the side characters, like Jonathan doesn't really serve a purpose too much, except for to obviously leave so that Dracula can see Mina's picture and come get her. But then he, I don't know, escapes and then is just like, cool, I'm in a nunnery, let's get married. Anyways, and then the three dudes.
And they were actually married. That was an actual church. They went through that ceremony. And for years, Keanu Reeves and Winona Ryder would text each other and say, like, hey, husband, how you doing? Because even though they
What?
weren't married under the law, since they went through the whole ceremony in the church, they saw themselves as being married under the eyes of God.
Oh
Isn't
my
that
gosh.
Wow.
That's amazing. But then the three dudes, the Texan, the psychiatrist, and the husband.
Mm-hmm. Well, fiance, I don't think they ever.
Oh yeah,
The
fiance.
suitors.
Yeah.
Their role was confusing because they're like fighting for Lucy, but then also work together to try to save her. But then the Texan maybe dies, but then isn't dead. I guess I got really lost at a couple of points with
He's
them.
definitely dead.
Yeah.
He definitely gets killed at the end.
Yeah.
I had a note. I'm trying to find exactly which one and how I worded it because it was, to me, it felt very interesting. Here it is. It's like, this is almost actually kind of like Bridgerton. And this gets into that melodrama of it. You have the whole, there's the virginity of it, the purity, there's the multiple suitors and which suitor will, she pick. And then we're suitors, so we're rivals, but we're also friends and we're gonna, fight for her honor and, we're gonna...
It's also gross.
Well, yeah, and then it's also, like you said, when you get into it, it's like, but there's also this weird thing going on, and then you've got, Harker is, he's the pure one waiting for her, but also is tempted when the opportunity arises.
And then is he a vampire because he didn't suck their blood, but they sucked his blood?
No, he's drained. He is definitely aged tremendously. Because of the way that they drank from him. But because he never drank of their blood, he's not actually one of the living dead.
Which is the same way it works in Twilight.
Like, to me, the function of Jonathan Harker is his evolution into impotence. The fact that, like, he was like, oh, he's my childhood crush. I love him so. But then, like, yo, bad boy just showed up. I actually dig this dude. And when he comes back, when Jonathan Harker comes back, he has been drained, he has been ruined, and is no longer physically attractive and no longer emotionally attractive to Mina.
But the promise that she made to Jonathan is the thing of actual value, not her lust for Dracula.
Yeah.
Dang.
And the fact that you would choose a promise over what you actually desire is like,
That's society, man.
that's exactly what you want to do in the 90s.
But that's so unbelievable because I would always choose Keanu Reeves over Gary Oldman. Old man.
I don't know. Gary Oldman, like, he's got some kind of sick charisma. I can see not fully Draculaed out, but maybe like 30% of the way to Dracula, and I was
Whoa.
my promise to Brad is very pure. So obviously I would choose that over Gary Oldman, but he could get it.
But you'd go see a picture show with him.
Oh yeah.
No, wait though. When you say 30% or 70% of Dracula or whatever, are part of the way, do you mean?
I like him slightly vampy.
Oh, okay, slightly
With the
vampy.
fingers.
Gotcha. That's.
Yeah, probably not the fingers.
I'm trying to figure out. Are we talking, top hat glasses? Or are we talking?
Smartly dressed, owns tracts of land.
Oh man.
Can turn into a wolf. That's kind of hot.
But then he also turns into some scary looking things.
Yeah.
Mist.
Oh, that's kind of hot too. The mist is hot. Hot mist.
That was one of the many different effects. So I just have to laundry list here a little bit. So green smoke, that was one that I listed. The brides coming out of the bed the first time that they come to take him. How they're just sort of appearing from the sheets. Dracula climbing the walls. The fact that you've got Dracula's shadows, all of that shadow play was amazing. The Wolfman or Batman or whatever creature, its makeup, chef's kiss.
Do we know who did the makeup?
Not off the top of my head.
Bite marks. That's a good question, Lisa. We're gonna give this person props. Bite marks that sort of transition to the wolf eyes, the same way that we had the transition from the peacock's eyes into the tunnel. In the memories showing during the absinthe chat, they sort of use that technique where you in film would overlay portions of a previously filmed scene, previously shown scene, and you sort of lay them on top of the scene that's in front of you, and that sort of blurriness of both pictures happening at the same time. All of that. There's just so many fantastic examples of practical old school effects being done so well in this movie, and in such a way that while much of this movie for me does not hold up, much of that does. And I couldn't help but think to myself how many things would just be done so poorly with CG today if this was made.
It is visually really beautiful. And I think all of the people are idealized,
And I Francis Ford Coppola felt like when Dracula was present, the laws of physics don't really exist. And that's why you have the water going upwards. During the shaving sequence when he's shaving young Keanu's neck, the sets are actually physically being pushed in closer so that the audience gets a sense of claustrophobia. There's a lot of thought going into those effects as well.
His cape, his long
shadow.
red cape, that was drag, my friends.
You're not wrong.
What was I gonna say? Oh, this is a dumb question because I don't know a lot of vampire stuff, and it's not Twilight related. So
okay, I'll close my eyes and disassociate.
I remember there was a movie that came out maybe early 2000s called Van Helsing. Is Van Helsing? That's my only reference to him. Is he a vampire or he's a vampire slayer?
Vampire Slayer.
But he, at one point in the movie, was standing here, and then he was behind then he jumped.
Okay, so...
Do you know what I'm saying?
When he's trying to prove a point...
To the dudes.
To the guys that are like, oh, no, this can't be explained, or something. He says, surely you understand as a scientist there's things in this world that you cannot explain, but you see happen. I believe that was just him, using sleight of hand or distraction to kind of... perform a quote-unquote magic trick to prove his point.
He definitely knows things that a scientist, quote unquote, at that time did not know, and he believes things that are a little outside the realm of normal medicine. Like
the blood transfusions, man, that was rough. Where he's pumping it in and pumping it out.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah. And I think there's a quick question there too of is his character also supposed to be immortal? Because I think from your point on the Hugh Jackman vehicle.
It's Hugh Jackman?
Yeah, he plays
now I
Van
have
Helsing.
to watch it.
I'd be more than happy to watch that with you again this spooky season. It is also not an objectively good film in my opinion, but it's fun and dumb, and it is what it is. And I do think it clearly intentionally mimics some of this. There's also, I can't remember the actor's name in that, but the guy performing Dracula in that is also just off the wall. But what I was going to say, sorry, is someone made the case, like, is Van Helsing somehow also immortal? Because I think he is in that movie. Or is, in this movie with Bram Stoker's, is he maybe just a reincarnate the same way that Mina is a reincarnate? Because
because of the
Anthony Hopkins
Anthony Hopkins playing the priest. I
Yes.
never read it that way.
Oh.
I always read it that those as two different characters representing sort of the rigid rules of man. The Van Helsing Anthony Hopkins has lived a life for sure. He's got that crazy scar on his face. He is such a blowhard. He's such a violently aggressive person, but I don't think he's supernatural in my interpretation of the movie.
I would agree with that. I did wonder about the reincarnation thing. I might have been able to get on board with, because neither one is really explained or really gotten into. They just kind of, Dracula seems obsessed with her and keeps referring to her as his beloved, and she seems to sort of have memories of when.
Yeah, like I think my take on it is when Dracula, living the long life that he lives, and he looks at people. I don't know if it's actual reincarnation or he's just like, this is just like that priest, dude. I hated that guy and I hate this guy.
I like that take. I like that. That's interesting.
Interesting. I didn't catch that Winona Ryder was the first Elizabeta.
Oh, I thought I mentioned that while we were watching it. I thought
You did, but at the beginning I was like, wait, I know that girl. And then I realized we're going all the way back to the beginning. I will say I really liked the setup of, like, this is who Dracula is. That, to me, I was like, I get this. I understand. And even when he was going away to war and she was so sad, like, putting myself in her shoes, like, if Nick was leaving and it was like sure death, I would be so sad. So I definitely felt it at that point. And then he comes back and she's dead. Did you all notice that she moves? She blinks.
I did not.
I rewound it. I was like, look at this, look at this.
She insisted on me rewinding it, and if you're looking for it, it is very obvious.
I do tend to fixate on when somebody's playing dead on screen.
Yep.
I do like to see if they're twitching.
She flinched.
And suspension of disbelief is a skill. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes, especially when you're watching older films,
Yeah.
Yeah. Now they just freeze the still. They freeze the frame so that nobody's breathing.
Yeah. Yeah. But you can definitely tell that these are Winona and Keanu's earlier roles. I don't know all of their movies, but Keanu.
They both look tremendously young, and Keanu's
an American.
That's why I mentioned when he did Much Ado About Nothing with Kenneth Branagh. Like, there are places where he just doesn't fit.
Yeah.
You know, he barely fits Neo, and he's just unfit for that character. What that makes it the most compelling character he has ever played. But you're like, this guy
Johnny Utah is the most
this
compelling
guy is
character.
clearly a cop pretending to be a surfer. Like, that's who he is.
He should have just stopped at some point and said, I am an FBI agent.
He's a square aspiring to be a circle.
I will say, I think, to the point that you were making earlier, Brad, and this is where I think it was a choice. I don't think everyone was able to execute the choice. So Francis Ford Coppola and George Lucas are also good friends, by the way, is my understanding.
I put at one point he looks like Palpatine, right?
So, yes, that is not where I was going, but you're not wrong.
Oh, okay.
The point I was going to make is they're both very technical directors. And I think when you watch the prequels, especially when George Lucas was at his stage where nobody gave him any notes, I think.
No feedback?
The reasons those movies, in my opinion, don't do as well as some of the others is he's not necessarily known for being an actor's director.
Yeah, but here's the thing. That's definitely true with George Lucas. I think 90% of the job with George Lucas and directing with actors is the casting process, and you get what you get. Francis Ford Coppola does fancy himself very much an actor's director.
Interesting. I did not know
one
that.
of the cool things that they did before they filmed anything is they got the whole cast in a room, and for 2.5 days, they read the entire novel out loud.
Oh,
Right? They didn't do a round table. I'm sure they actually did that too. But for 2.5 days, the whole cast was reading the book so that they could internalize the novel. And Coppola since then has only become more intense about his rehearsals. And if you've heard anything about how he got the actors together for Megalopolis, it was very much about finding the choices before the camera was filming, and then also finding, the improv while the camera was forming. And so you could still be that director and get a performance like Keanu Reeves in Dracula.
Well, where I was taking it was that, and because I thank you for that insight, I did not know any of that, Brad, about Francis Ford Coppola, but what it rung out to me is like, there was a choice to have it be operatic or almost Shakespearean. Like we are going to overplay every single line read.
Well,
and some people were ready for that assignment and others were not.
Sure, that's totally true. It's also very much about silent film, and in silent film, the actors have to communicate solely through movement and expression, and that's the style of performance I think that you have here as well as hand cranking film throughout the movie.
Like they really did that?
Did they hand crank that? Is this movie was shot?
You can see this. Yeah, those like those shots that replicate what a silent film looks like. A lot of it's from the perspective of Dracula, is hand cranked film.
That's also amazing. Just another layer to appreciate about this movie, because I definitely noticed it, but I guess in my 2024 brain, I sort of assumed, I'm sure that's some filter that they've thrown over it. You know what I mean? But no, that makes absolute sense. In 1992, they probably, that's fantastic, and that does add a layer to it. Do you have another note? You look like you were getting ready to say something.
I was just reading through. I have all these notes that are irrelevant because they're explaining it so well. Okay, I did
not understand this thing.
Choices.
Oh, they've already told me.
And it doesn't mean that you like the movie or that you
No,
you
I
should
still
like the
don't
movie.
like the movie. I also made I feel like Carrie Elwes,
I think
that
that's
right?
how you pronounce it. I think so.
Equals James Marsden.
Oh.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah,
like
I could see that.
the James Marsden of I don't know. That was just a random thought I had.
To have As You Wish, Princess Bride. Why can't I remember the name of the character?
The Dread Pirate
Pirate.
Roberts.
Yeah, Dread Pirate Roberts. To have the Rocketeer and Dread Pirate Roberts on the screen at the same time, for me, I was just like, get me in that sandwich. Like that. Like that is my pubescence
And
on
with
the
nail.
screen. And with nail. I mean, I wouldn't turn him away. It would go, okay, since you asked, not at all. It would go Rocketeer, Dread Pirate Roberts,
Tom Waits,
Keanu Reeves, Keanu Reeves, then Tom Waits, then Dracula.
Richard E. Grant.
Richard E. Grant. Oh shit. So Richard E. Grant is going to go clearly above Dracula, but below Keanu Reeves.
Okay.
Somewhere in there. I should have wrote this down. This is critical.
You
This is
didn't
very
prepare
important.
for this.
This is the one thing I was like, I'm going to do this on the fly, and now I'm embarrassed. I apologize.
I'm surprised you guys didn't interrupt me to the same as you interrupted me, Danielle, for not recalling to give the women all credit. I knew that the Texan looked familiar, but he didn't look familiar enough to me, and for whatever reason, I think when I looked at his IMDb, Rocketeer did not show up. That is also a movie from my childhood that
I
stands
freaking
out.
love that movie.
Yeah.
Billy Campbell.
Yeah, Dreamboat.
Danielle's like, I've never seen that
I've
movie.
never
What
even
is-
heard
What is the
You're
of
Rocketeer?
for a treat. You do not like scary movies. This is not a scary movie.
Oh, yeah, not at all.
It's a sweet movie. It's a romance. There's some action. Nazis get theirs.
Sounds right up my
Great.
alley.
I bought that DVD not too long ago, actually, because I decided I wanted to make sure that I had it. And so
The only thing that would have made it better is if it was a musical.
Well, that would have heightened it. I don't have a ton of other notes. I did stop taking notes at one point because there were some scenes in here that just hit really, really hard. We just had a baby, and so any scenes where they're eating babies really got rough, and so I kind of like tuned out at one point. When they bring the little girl down the stairs to feed to Lucy, I made Nick fast forward, so I don't know exactly what happened during that
She
point.
doesn't eat that baby, does she?
No, Lucy doesn't eat the child, but that baby does get eaten by the
that
bride.
baby does get ate.
Yeah.
We don't have kids.
Yeah.
It's-
That doesn't mean we condone babies.
Yeah. I
But they
Figured.
did absolutely traumatize that child because they didn't show the child what Lucy was going to look like.
Oh,
Oh
my
my God.
gosh.
Full vampire. So they put the child into Lucy's hands. Lucy looks the way that Lucy looks, and that reaction that you get in the
She
movie
seems
is
so
genuine.
scared at that. That killed
explains
me.
a lot, honestly,
Yeah.
because I had a note of not a big fan of the baby eating from earlier, but they don't really show it. Like they kind of, it's happening and then it's covered and nothing happens. Lucy's, I had her makeup down as another one that I didn't get to see much of, but it looked fantastic. We skipped though because I was already, like I said, a little triggered, and then Danielle said, I can't watch this. And so I just skipped ahead. I was like, we know that she's going down to where they are. Whether the kid dies or not doesn't matter. They're about to kill her. I know what's happening.
You missed the blood vomit.
Yeah,
I am sorry we missed the blood vomit. I bet that was another
not
fantastic
sorry.
practical effect.
Blood vomit. Yeah.
But yeah, knowing that was the case, I literally had the thought afterwards. Sorry to interrupt it. The look on that child's face was triggering even more so because it was an actual genuine look of abject terror that I have seen on our own child's face. And now that you know that that's because it was a very real abject terror that the young girl was having.
You think like this is a woman who has sex for pleasure and, like she is completely debased herself where she doesn't know the value of life. Right. So like to me, it is rooted
Obviously.
in like it's that whole 90s thing. Like in the 90s, we wanted to be as puritanical as possible while still getting to see sex on the screen and people who have sex get theirs and show that they're the bad person, they're the gross person, they're the selfish person. So like to me, like the extremity of this film is totally about shaming women who are sexual. And that's the entire point of Lucy. And like I would love to hear, like, Francis Ford Coppola is an old dude. I'm sure he still has the same opinion. This idea of like life is about self-denial, and those people who don't enjoy their life will get eternal life in heaven. It's just like a really toxic idea.
Yeah, this explains.
Such a good movie, though.
It is a fun movie. I do enjoy it, and I wish it was a musical.
This explains a lot of me and my repression. I mean, I was raised Catholic, and you were always told if you were promiscuous, you were bad.
Yep.
You are wrong. You are Lucy.
I would argue it goes a step further than even that.
Oh, tell me.
Because I was gonna say, Lisa, I think your insight is fantastic. I think it's absolutely on point. I was gonna interrupt and say, well, no, I think that's still an issue. But I think the thing that was the kernel there that has changed is there were a lot of movies in the 80s and 90s that wanted to show the sex while simultaneously making you feel bad for wanting to see the sex, basically. Like,
right.
Whereas now I think we have there's lots of people that don't think you should want to see the sex, and then there's people that are like, whatever, and just do it, and then they show it.
Every time Lucy was having like convulsions, her boob came out. I don't know if y'all noticed that.
Oh, we noticed.
13-year-old Brad definitely noticed. No, but I think that your repression and a lot of other people's repression goes a step further. It's not even just like promiscuity or premarital. It is like, no, sex is not a thing that, like, you're married. You've been married for 5+ years in our case, or 15+ years in their case. Like, no. You're not. You don't have sex. That's not a thing. Like, just magically babies come from storks. Like,
that's what happened.
You don't talk about it. You certainly don't enjoy it. And then you live your miserable life, and then you let God end it on his terms.
Yeah.
Well, on that note.
Yeah. Well,
Good night.
I guess we'll go ahead and end this podcast. Was there anything else that stood out to the two of you that you just wanted to make sure it was mentioned, burning importance for you?
The score is rad. I love the
great.
score. And when this movie came out, the score was then in every movie trailer you saw. Like for 10 years, every movie had this exact same score on its trailer.
Have you guys seen Interview with a Vampire?
I have.
Have I?
Yeah.
Not with me, so
Then no.
probably not.
It's another kind of weird, horny vampire film. that maybe Danny wouldn't like.
Someone
But,
was explaining this to me, actually. Who's in it? Brad Pitt?
Brad Pitt, Tom
Yep,
Cruise,
and Tom Cruise.
Kirsten Dunst.
And Kirsten Dunst plays
Antonio Banderas.
a child vampire who
Is horny.
horny because she's an adult woman stuck in a child's body. And the film is weird and the book is really weird.
Yeah.
So watch Twilight, read Twilight.
This is
That
a
book
Twilight
isn't about
podcast.
repression at
I
all.
was just gonna say, like, well, I think that's for a lot of reasons largely what vampire stories have always been about. Is about that
Yeah.
repression of sexuality and the sort of the blood being linked to it, and there's been, I know, theses have probably been written on the fact that the eating of blood being related to women's cycles and their bleeding and things of that nature.
And also it's like a gross thirst.
Yes.
Like there's something that you want that you believe your existence depends on. It doesn't. You're immortal, right? You're immortal, but you want this thing and you'll do anything to get it and you don't care how much life that it destroys. And that's really, really hot. That's really friggin' hot.
I will have to admit, Dracula was a little bit hot at the end when she's like, I'm just gonna give in to you. And then he's got his wig flapping in the wind and before he dies.
Yeah, so good.
Well, I think if we let them off the mic soon enough, Brad and Lisa might be off to have a good time since they keep talking about all this stuff getting going.
Oh yeah. Anything with Gary Oldman, we are certainly
Gary Oldman gets you going.
Our old man foreplay.
Oh no, Brad, not the fingers.
A little.
So we'll go ahead.
You're welcome. You started it.
I'll go ahead and start us off with our heart ratings and would we renew our vows. So for listeners who are new, if you're new to this, heart ratings is 0 to 5, supposed to be a relatively objective rating of how good we think this movie is. And then the would you renew your vows is sort of a would you choose to watch this again? Do you think you'll see it again? I'm going to give it a, you all have brought me up to a 3.0 out of 5. I do think there's lots of good qualities to this movie. There are some things that I don't hold up, and there's pieces that we've already talked about ad nauseum. For me personally, I will not renew my vows. If I do not end up watching this movie ever again, I will not be disappointed. Having said that, if someday someone in our lives in the future is like, oh, you've shared The Godfather with me, and I really enjoyed that. I now want to watch all of the filmography of that director, and that includes Dracula. I'd be like, okay. So
That's a tough road to hoe.
that's a long way to get there. Danielle.
Yeah. I was going to say the exact same thing. I was going to have lower hearts, but you all opened my eyes to the masterpiece filmmaking that is this movie. Do I like the plot / story? No.
Not for you. It's okay.
It's not for me. Would I renew my vows? No. Thank you. Thank you for making me watch it. I'll go watch The Godfather again, though. That's a good one. But not 2 or 3. I haven't seen
That's what I want to know. Lisa, would you watch The Godfather again?
No, I'm good.
Oh,
I'm good. I don't I tried. I really gave it a good effort. I could understand what it was about. I could see the themes in it,
You
Not for
definitely
me.
need to watch The White Lotus season 2. There's a whole Godfather thing.
There is.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm
they
in.
go to where The Godfather
That's
was
true.
filmed.
That's true.
Yeah.
But when it comes to Bram Stoker's Dracula, Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's, I gotta say it again because I messed up. Francis Ford Coppola, Bram Stoker's Dracula. I would give it a 3 stars, 3 out of 5. I do enjoy an interesting conversation. I do think it's visually stunning. I do really enjoy both the casting choices and all of the performances for all of their quirks and just, I don't know. It just takes me to, I don't know. It just reminds me of being, I don't know. I like it. I think
She
it's,
wants to remain married.
I think it's very fun. I love to look at it. It's beautiful. Also, I do like to think about that time in the 90s and have we come far? Have we become better? Has our attitudes gotten better? I think for some, yes. I think the culture is hopefully moving in a more sex positive direction. Everybody remember to vote. And would I renew my vows? Yeah, I enjoyed it.
You're gonna.
I would. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I
Whether you
enjoyed
like it or not, it'll be played again in
Yeah.
your house.
You live in this house.
Yeah. I genuinely.
It's
yeah,
gonna
enjoy
be
it.
playing again.
I can enjoy a 3.
Yeah, so after this conversation, you've emboldened me even further. It's definitely four hearts.
Okay.
I freaking love this movie. I just love so many aspects of it. And I will definitely rewatch it. I own it.
Gestures
over there.
wildly
You didn't
across
have
the
to
room.
stream it.
Yeah.
Nice.
All right. Well, that is our summary of things. But then
That's our summary of things, guys. Thanks for listening to our podcast.
that is so. Before we go, though, Gullicksons,
Yeah.
give us all of your plugs once again. Where can people find you? What do you have coming up that's exciting?
Yes, please.
And then remind us, how long do the different Kickstarters last?
So the nice thing is that both Kickstarters went live 24 hours apart from each other. So for the entire month of October, basically, or for most of October, you have an opportunity to back them. Pots and Panels launched on the 8th of October, and the
Which is the future for us.
Comics Courier launched on the 7th.
And which is the past, and it is fully funded.
Yeah,
So
that's
let's
awesome.
Very
stretch
impressive and
goals.
amazing, by the way. Yes.
Yeah, we're very excited to have our first comic out in the world. But you can find all things Comic Book Couples Counseling by going to comicbookcouplescounseling.com. Our episodes, our recent episodes have been conversations with Chris Claremont, the guy who has written more X-Men comics than anybody else. We have a conversation with Nick Dragata talking about the new Absolute Batman. We go full spoilers on the first issue. And we have a conversation with Tiffany Babb all about comics journalism and what compelled her to create the Comics Courier.
That's awesome.
That's amazing. All right. And Danny, where can people find you, and you do have anything to plug?
Sure, at DannyMiami4 on Instagram. I'm back live performing, baby. So Comedy Sports Theater Chicago. Yes. And
All
Nick,
right.
how about you?
Well, you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and
I
Letterboxd.
think it's called X.
I refuse.
No.
At Nick Loves Movies, that's Nic, Nick, Luv, Love, Nick Loves Movies. On all of those handles, you can then also find our podcast on pretty much all of the socials that exist at the letter N, Love with Movies, all spelled out. So that's N, Love with Movies. And if you're listening to this instead of watching it, you can see all of those ats on the screen below us. So just go find us on either YouTube or Spotify. And then if you want to see them, Brad's finger is pointing at them right now with it really fantastically. All right. Well, that's going to do it for us. I love you, Danny.
I love you, Nick.
And we love you, Gullicksons. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us. This was so fun.
good-
And we love you too.
Oh, thank
Aw.
you.
And Dracula.
Mwah! Ha, ha, ha. Bye. In love with movies. We did it! Oh,
Yeah.
I
Hey,
didn't remember
governor, my mom's from Devon.
That's the best British accent he can do.